Good day. Today we are going to be looking at our novel North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, and we are going to be focusing on chapter 17. What is a strike? That is the epigraph of our chapter. There are briars besetting every path, which call for patient care. There is a cross in every lot, and an earnest need for prayer. So this little poem is encapsulating the entire chapter. And I think it's safe to say that this is metaphoric because the metaphor here is, of course, life as a journey, maybe journeys even too strong, as walking down the path. And then the first line speaks of there are briars besetting every path. And the briars are, of course, referring to these little shrubs. They are bushes, they are thorny, and they, of course, represent the obstacles and the challenges that we find in life. And so it says there are briars or obstacles besetting every path, which calls for patient care. So you need to have the patience to be able to work through the obstacle or the challenge that you are faced with. There is a cross in every lot, and the cross represents, you can hear the religious overtones, represents the burden that every individual must bear. There's a cross in every lot and an earnest need for prayer. And so the idea is, which is being conveyed, is that it is only with divine help you need to be constantly praying to get you through your difficult time. And so when we start chapter 17, Margaret is going out. She leaves the safety and security of her home. And as she's walking, she encounters a lot more people on the road than she would normally see. And the description on page 158 focuses on people who are not just on the road, and I'm talking about men as your breadwinners, but they are not doing anything in particular. The men are standing around. And in line 5, it specifically speaks of the unusual loiterers in the street, men with hands in their pockets sauntering. And sauntering is an interesting verb because it conveys the idea of there's no rush. They are just walking really slowly because they don't have the jobs to go to at the moment because they are on strike. And then in line 9 on page 158, we focus on the more ill looking of the men. And one wonders, why are the men ill? They are ill from their work in the factories, you see, and now they are out in the sun. They are exposed to the light, and one can probably see their illness more clearly now than before. And then this goes all the way down to line 16, which is 3 lines from the bottom of the page, where Margaret says that she would rather go and visit Bessie Higgins, since she cannot go for a lovely country walk now that she is trapped in the city of Milton. And then on page 159, when we look at line 8 all the way to 11, there's that little paragraph in which we see the optimism on the part of Bessie. She says, well, third time pays for all. See if we don't dang the masters this time. And so on behalf of the workers, there is that not just optimism, but that fervent belief that this time we are going to be successful and we are going to persuade the employers to give into our demands. And I think that maybe there's this false optimism, because the fact that the masters didn't give in the first time or the second time is already indicative that the strike this time, what's to make it different this time? And she says, we've missed it aforetime, I grant you, but this time we laid our pans desperate deep. And so the idea is that they so badly want increased wages. They so badly want better conditions. They are determined to give it. Now, I must stop and explain that a strike, and this is so much reminding me during the apartheid regime, a strike or any mass action is only successful when you have the entire mass behind the action. If you have one or two people who are scared or change their mind for whatever reason, then it starts falling flat. And because those one, two, it's like a leak that develops, and then others will follow, and then those ones are getting paid, but the rest of the people who are on strike are not getting paid. So then where are you going to stay? You want the better conditions, but you're not getting paid, and you see the others going to work, you see the others benefiting, your family is hungry, the pressure is enormous, and you end up caving, and nothing is achieved. In fact, the employers are the one who end up having the last laugh. And then in line 17 and 18, we are still on page 159. We have Bessie speaking, and she's tired. She is physically drained. She is drained because of her years of work. She is drained because of her illness, and most concerningly is she is tired in her spirit because of the quality of her life, because of her day-to-day existence, which is not even living, it's simply merely existing. And the ill health is definitely taking its toll on Bessie. And so she says in line 17, this is the last I'll see. Before it's ended, I shall be in the great city, the holy Jerusalem. And so the idea is that Bessie knows her time left on earth is short, and she will be dying, and she knows that strikes can last quite long. And I think she is enough of a realist to realize that her health is so bad that she won't live for much longer. And then when we go to page 160, we have from line 7, I think, until line 11, we have the father speaking. So she went to visit Betsy, and then the father is also there, and he uses the word clemmed, and clemmed is now the starving. And so there is a contradiction between workers in the north and workers in the south. And the workers in the south are not as able to stand up for themselves. Maybe they put their families first, maybe they are just not bold by nature, and they accept the conditions, and they don't do the striking. And the father says in line 4, I know naught of your ways down south. I have heard they are a pack of spiritless, downtrodden men, well clemmed to death, well starved, you see. So the one who feeds you is the one who controls you. That's what he's getting at here. Too much days with claiming to know when they are put upon. Now not so here. From line 7 onwards. We know when we are put upon, and we have too much blood in us to stand, and we are passionate people. We are militant. We can stand up. We just take our hands from our looms and say, you may claim us, but you'll not put upon us my masters, and be danged to them, they shan't this time. And so the people in the north, the workers, are a lot more spirited, and nobody enjoys the hardship of starvation, but they are prepared to endure it to achieve their end goal. And then when we get to page 9, from the bottom of the page going up now, and you say they never strike down there, asked Nicholas abruptly. In other words, even though the conversation has moved on, he comes back to it because he finds it so difficult to just absorb that people can be that passive, and not just passive, but used by the employers. No, said Margaret, I think they have too much sense. And I think, replied he, dashing the ashes out of his pipe with so much vehemence that it broke, that it's not that they have too much sense, but they have too little spirit. So even though he really likes Margaret, he becomes very upset when she says they've too much sense, because the implication is that the people in the south have sense. That's why they're not protesting. The people in the north don't have any sense. They're actually quite stupid to want better conditions. Okay. Oh, father, said Bessie, what have he gained by striking? Think of that first strike when mother died, how we all had to claim you the worst of all. Yet many a one went in every week at the same wage till all were gardening that was work for, and some went beggars all their lives after. And so clearly the first strike was the most traumatic. Not only was the entire family starving, but the mother, it sounds like, was giving her share of food to the rest of the family, and that maybe resulted in the mother dying. And then the father was also starving, and nothing happened because if nothing else, it was the hunger that broke the strike, because people were forced back because they had to feed their families. Now, if you read from line 8 onwards, and I'm on page 161, there's quite a long passage which gives us the reason for the strike. And he says, why, you see, there's five or six masters who have set themselves against paying the wages they've been paying these 2 years past, and flourishing upon, and getting richer upon. And now they come to us and they say, we are to take less, and we won't. We'll just clam them to death first and see who work for them then. Now, we have to acknowledge that the workers, in this case, they are not being unreasonable. How can your bosses come to you and ask you for a reduction in your wages? But and the reason for that is so that they can increase their profits. I mean, come on, these are people who have families to feed. So it's very, very unreasonable. And then 2-3 lines down, he says, I just look forward to the chance of dying at my post sooner than yielding. That's what folks call fine and honorable in a soldier, and why not in a poor weaver chap? So he says, just because I'm not a soldier doesn't mean that I can't be honorable, doesn't mean that I can't have dignity. I'd rather die in my protest than be handicapped and be disadvantaged by my employer. And then the last 3 lines on page 161. Don't ask me, said Margaret. I'm very ignorant. Ask some of your masters. Surely they will give you a reason for it. It is not merely an arbitrary decision of theirs come to with no reason. And so at that point, even though she does acknowledge she's not clued up, she doesn't really know much about this topic, she still seems to side with the owners, saying that I'm sure they've got good reason for making this request of the reduction in salary. And then we go to page 162, and I think that the rest of the chapter is actually quite a discussion of the strike, and the purpose for this is that Gaskell wants to inform a Victorian audience about how the strike comes about, and more importantly, she is putting across the perspective of the employee. She's presenting to a Victorian audience what it's like to be a common worker. And so that, I suppose, is the purpose of this kind of detail in the chapter, and Margaret participates in this strike talk so that we can really understand what is going on here. So you have to read all of that. And when I just want to focus on the last 14 lines on the page, and from line 14, if you count from the bottom. So I say hooray for the strike, and let Thornton and Stixon and Hamper and their set look to it. Thornton, said Margaret. Mr. Thornton of Marlborough Street. And so suddenly it's like her ears just, they just pick up. She's so alert when he speaks of Mr. B. And what he was doing was he was listing all the employers. And of course, maybe Margaret has forgotten that Mr. Thornton is ultimately an employer as well. And yes, Thornton of Marlborough Mill, as we call him, he's one of the masters, line 8 now, he's one of the masters you're striving with, is he not? What sort of master is he? And so she's very curious to get to know him from the worker's perspective, what kind of man he is. Now, she's already formed her own opinion of him. One, we know she's attracted to him. One, she knows he's a very successful, hard-working man. 3, she doesn't like the way he speaks to her. She finds that he just puts in a place, and she doesn't like that. And now she wants to know, what is he like as a master? And the description given is a comparison between him and a bulldog. And Mr. Higgins was actually trying to put across the point that he has the tenacity and the stubbornness of a bulldog. And she misunderstands, and she thinks it's talking about aesthetics, about his visage, that he's unattractive like a bulldog. But of course, it's not that at all. And then on page 163 we have the detailed explanation of how he sticks to his guns, he doesn't back down, and more importantly, that he is quite a fair man. And then on page 163, if you go to line 12, poor Bessie, said Margaret, turning round to her, you sigh over it all. You don't like struggling and fighting as your father does, do you? No, she said heavily, I'm sick on it. I could have wished to have had other talk about me in my latter days, my last days before I die, than just the clashing and clanging and clattering that has wearied my life long about work and wages and masters and hands and knobsticks. And so she sums up her life. It's been one struggle. It's just revolved around work and wages and conflict. And she wants to end her last bit of time on earth in a calm, in a passive, in a relaxed atmosphere, And then when we go to the last 7 lines on page 163, I reckon he'll want a comfort he can get out of either pipe or drink before he's done. Her father went out of doors, evidently to finish his pipe. And then we touch on something that is so significant but so important for the Victorian reader, who I think in general are very quick to see the working class as lazy, as drunkards. And what Bessie says here is profound. Before the strike is over, the father will want to find comfort in his pipe. So smoking a little bit of black tobacco gives him some comfort. Remember, this is a man without a wife. And then secondly, the drink. And it ends here, the last 3 lines on page 163. Now I'm not a fool, am I not, miss? There, I knew I ought for to keep father at home and away from the folk that are always ready to tempt a man in time of strike to go and drink. And there my tongue must needs quarrel with this pipe of his, and he'll go off, I know he will, and often as he wants to smoke, and nobody knows where it'll end. I wish I'd let myself be choked first. And so she's actually wishing she could hasten her death. And even though she says she She knows she should be stopping her father when it's a strike from going. She understands why he feels the urge to do it. Okay, and then there's that whole long explanation surrounding the alcohol that takes place on page 164, and then from the last 17 lines on page 164. And what is them to do? It's little blame to them if they do go into the gin shop for to make their blood flow quicker and more lively and see things they never seen at no other time, pictures and looking glass and such like. But father was never a drunkard, though maybe he's got worse for drink now and then. Only you see, and now her voice took a mournful, pleading tone, and this is the significant 5 lines here from line 11 down. At times of strike, there's so much to knock a man down, for all they start so hopefully. And where's the comfort to come from? You'll get angry and mad, they all do, and then they get tired out with being angry and mad, and maybe haven't done things in their passion they be glad to forget. Bless your sweet pitiful face, but you don't know what a strike is yet. And so she's basically saying that there's no way Margaret can empathize. She can't fully understand what the strike all it entails and how it affects the spirit of a man and almost breaks him down. And you can't blame him for finding some refuge in alcohol. Okay, so what happens all the way to page 165 is that Bessie, or Gaskell uses Bessie to explain the role of alcohol and the comfort it provides for the working class. And then of course we know that when Margaret doesn't know what to say, she falls back on Christianity and on religion as providing comfort. And if you go to page 165, it's about the middle of the page, line 15, well, which makes it about the end of the first big paragraph. Oh, Bessie, God is just, and our lots, which means our fates, our destinies, are well portioned out by him, although none but he knows the bitterness of our souls. And so the idea here is Margaret is saying, well, God decides our destiny, and if it's your destiny to have a hard life and to suffer, then so be it. And then if you go to line 7 from the bottom of the page, nay, Bessie, think, said Margaret, God does not willingly afflict. Don't dwell so much on the prophecies, but read the clearer parts of the Bible. And I get the sense that Margaret is very much shying away from the realities of life for these people. Don't read the negative parts of the Bible, just focus on the parts which promise you peace and the great year after. And then when we go to the last page of our chapter 17 and we look at line 8, where is your sister? Gone fustian cutting. I will love to let her go, but somehow we must live, and the union can't afford as much. And so the sister, the younger sister, has gone to the factory, and this fustian cutting is actually referring to the manufacturing of velvet. And so what she goes in, because she's an unskilled laborer, she would go in and she would cut all the loops of the cloth. And she says, I don't want her to go, but one, we need the income, because the union pays them so little, just a few pence every week, and they can't live on that. Okay, so what is significant here is that it's the sister Mary is the one who must provide the income. And then the very last 7 lines of our chapter 17, we see here that Margaret is so different to the rest of your Victorian era women. Because when she leaves, Bessie is thinking about Margaret, and she says, I wonder if there are many folk like her down south. She's like a breath of country air somehow. She freshens me up above a bit. Who would have thought that face, as bright and strong as the angel I dream of, could have known the sorrow she speaks on? And so, what she says is that Margaret provides her with so much comfort, and she admires her. She looks up to her. She holds her in high esteem, and she can't imagine that someone who's so angelic could also have her own challenges. And of course, the challenge now is her ill mother. And that ends chapter 17 of our novel, North and South.